Welcome to the Drama-Free Living Podcast. Dennis and Lisa McIntee here. And Lisa, has this ever happened to you where you're trying to make a connection to people and you're having this conversation and you immediately just, you know their answer and you start giving advice to them and then there's sort of this disconnect?
All of a sudden you feel like they just shut down. The conversation was going great, and then it's dead, kind of like a basketball that is deflated. Yeah. I mean, not fully deflated, but dead, and it bounces, and it just doesn't bounce.
Yeah, and this happens a lot. So this is what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Right, we're going to talk about some communication competencies, and let's just tell everybody a little bit about something that we've been digesting and some content that we've been working through. And it's from the book People Fuel by John Townsend. And we will put a link in the show so that people can get the book. If you haven't gotten the book, we'd love for you to get it. It's a fantastic book. But it's just content that we have really digested. And we want to maybe just give some of our own take on some of these ideas and how we've practically used them, because it really is important to really kind of connect with people. So the next 4 podcasts, we want to go through some different communication competencies that we've discovered have really been beneficial.
Yeah. So studies show that we lose focus, we lose perseverance, and we lose energy when we feel disconnected to other people. And this happens specifically, particularly, we're in stressful seasons, whether it's a stressful season in the work environment or in the holidays, or if it's just a stressful time in your own personal life. And so that is just that, and that isolation is very debilitating. So what's interesting about this is that in 2023, it was shown that 1 in 3 employees were either fully remote or primarily remote, so they worked hybrid. Yeah. And that we have a 40% increase in telecommuting over the last 3 years than we did back in 2019. And so this telecommunicating, the hybridness, the remote working can be a natural disconnect and a natural divide. Yeah. And so we have to deepen our communication skills even more, because otherwise we're going to lose focus, we're going to lose perseverance, and we will lose energy in our companies and in the vision of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And Lisa, isn't it really true that the deeper connections that we make, the more creative and collaborative we are? Right? Because without these deep connections, you're not as collaborative. And what's amazing is really creativity is just about making connections. It's almost that this seems to be 2 things that seem to be opposing, and you figure out how to connect them together. I mean, a little bit, it's kind of how iTunes started. Right? We took music, Steve Jobs took music, the internet, and took an MP3 player, and he connected them. They didn't seem to be connected, but he was able to make these connections. And out of that became this great creativity. And so we really want to talk about how do we deepen our connections with people so that we're more collaborative, more creative, and we really become more competent and really produce faster results.
That's really fascinating too. If you look at any great song that has been composed and written, it's fascinating because very rarely is it one name on that song. Yeah. Often there are multiple names that are listed in the credits of who created this song. Yeah. And part of that is that connection of creativity. So maybe one person came up with the lyrics and another person, they kind of augmented them, and they were like, okay, we need to add this bridge in here. And then someone else created the score, the musical, all of that aspect it's typically the best things. The best things that are created are a collaboration of creative minds. And when we have excellent communication, we can have excellent collaboration, and then we create amazing things.
Yeah, and could you say that if we don't have the connection, we're not really going to be collaborative?
It's hard. Super hard. It's very hard to have that collaboration without connection, because there is so much of us inside that we are creative individuals. We're creative beings. Now there are creatives Yep. But really, everyone is creative, and everyone has their own aspect of creativity in what they do. Whether you're a CPA or an engineer, something that's very an analytical type of thing, mm-hmm. there's still a huge element of creativity. I mean, I know I'm extremely thankful that our tax accountant is creative. I mean, creative within the bounds
within the legal
law,
structure, right?
Within the legal structure, but absolutely,
right.
there is a level of creativity that you have to be the best at what you do.
Yeah. Well, I remember somebody asked Steve Jobs one time. He said, "Well, what is being creative?" And he says, "Well, you put things together. And they says, well, what if you're really creative? And he said, you put a lot of things together. And it's that kind of idea is that the deeper the connections, we're able to connect, we're able to be more collaborative, more creative. So let's get into some of these competencies that we've discovered. And really, Lisa, we just got to be honest, we're a work in progress and we're still working on them. And it's part of why we just wanted to share some of our experiences really over the last couple of months and some things we've been doing some deep dives into. And it's been very helpful for us.
Absolutely. So what we've got is we have a communications competency checklist.
Okay.
And it's really, these are 25 skills to help increase your competency, your communication competency, so you can be more collaborative, so you can be more creative, so you can dive deeper with your team, with your relationships, and just be, more effective, and things can go faster. Like, Steve Jobs, it's like you can create a lot of things. It's when you have this. So communication competencies checklist, if you want it, if you think it'll help you be able to communicate better, grab it. We've got the download available, and it'll hopefully help you. And we're going to go through some of this first aspect of these competencies, these communication competencies. It's really all about syncing and alignment. So syncing and alignment.
Kind of syncing up with people.
Right. Visioneering and just being collaborative together. So this first one is acceptance. And what's fascinating about this is that we all have an aspect of a critical judge in our heads. And oftentimes this judge is highly critical. This judge is highly harsh and often even very condemning. We all have this judge in our heads. It's and to what level you allow it to be critical and condemning and judgmental and harsh is something that you have to work in with yourself. But what happens when we have this critical, harsh, very condemning judge, it changes how our brain works, and it changes the chemistry of it, and it causes us to go out of the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is really where we're rational, where we tend to act mature. But when we are under this harsh, critical, very condemning inner judge, I mean, it happens too when it's exterior, but when it's this inner judge, we jump out of our prefrontal cortex and we go into our amygdala. And our amygdala is where all of the emotions happen. It's where we go into fight, flight, fawn, and freeze mode. And that's where our triggers happen that can cause us to react in a way that, we weren't even intending to when we started this conversation.
Yeah. And Lisa, isn't it true that people are typically harder on people just like they're hard on themselves, right? If I'm super hard on myself, say I've had this big inner critic, right? And I typically turn out and I'm typically hard on other people.
That is the tendency. I mean, you can't say always, but it's a huge tendency of if you are hard on yourself, you're going to be hard on other people. And oftentimes you will find people that are very harsh on other people. They tend to have a very harsh inner critic.
It's kind of this black or white, either or type of thinking. And really the world is pretty gray. It really is. And so this whole acceptance is huge.
Yeah. So acceptance really, truly allows us to be open. It allows us to be vulnerable. It allows us to be teachable. Because when somebody feels judged, they're just gonna shut down. And that is not going to help us be collaborative. Yeah. It's not going to help us be creative and create lots of great things, like what Steve Jobs said.
Yeah. So just really having this no judgment and, just acceptance, accept people for who they are, how they're created, how they're hardwired.
We're just all different.
Yeah. It's really great. Just we're all different, just not as good as each other. No. Right. We're all different. Okay. So
moving on.
And moving on, right? But the next one I want to kind of talk about, I want to take is really comfort. Now, this is kind of an odd one, but Lisa, how many times do we fail, like with projects?
A lot.
Yeah, or
happens all the time.
Right, something crashes and burns, or you can get halfway through. I remember working on a project one time, got by halfway through, and then I just totally lost it. Like I lost the document, I accidentally deleted it, but it was gone, right? And you have this sort of, oh my gosh, this grieving process. So it's anytime you experience failure or loss, and it is very common, and we need to step in and provide comfort for people. And that's really kind of validation of the loss or validation of the grief that you feel. And kind of just acknowledge the reality of also, yeah, listen, I get it. That can be really painful.
Yeah, that really sucks.
Yeah.
That just really sucks. I mean, that's really all it is.
Yeah.
Is comfort is, yeah, wow, I cannot believe you just lost your entire project.
Yeah, that could be really hard. And just instead of just kind of glossing over it, hey, just get over it. Come on, move on, let's get over it. Which is sometimes what leaders do because we're moving so fast, or other people do.
Yeah.
And then it also prevents isolation. Because I think a lot of times people feel alone in the loss. They feel alone in the failure. And that's one thing we can
It only happens to me.
Right. And we kind of come alongside people because we have this idea, even if one of our team members fail, it's kind of like all of us fail. If one person drops the ball, right, it affects all of us. It's not just in a silo in one person, right? And so coming alongside of people and realize if one person loses, we all lose. And that does provide like a sense of comfort, to people. And then I think it also normalizes that process, that becomes normal. And I think that's the key. People think it's abnormal, and then they kind of isolate. They self-isolate themselves. And here's what's fascinating, Lisa. It looks different for everybody. Everybody has a different experience, and we have unique experiences. And so this whole comfort idea, it looks different, but you just want to step in and acknowledge the loss and allow people to feel. I mean, you do this with me really good sometimes is, something will happen and I'll just be sad. And I remember you asking me one day, you said, well, do you just need to sit in the sad for a bit? And I go, yeah, just can you give me 5 minutes? Just let me feel the sad. I'm going to be okay. But if you were to come in and just sort of tell me what to do this, or do things like, you shouldn't feel that way.
Right.
And I think that's the key thing. Well, should or shouldn't, I do feel this way, and just acknowledge it. And it really helps people get out of isolation.
Absolutely. And then along with that is attunement.
Okay.
And attunement really is being aware. It's bringing harmony. It's being responsive. It's kind of accommodating. And the best way to explain it would be you've got a guitar and you've got these strings on this guitar, and they're not all the same note, but they're tuned together so they flow well and they sound right.
Well, and thinking about it, they're two different notes, but they're in tune together.
Right.
Yeah, and so you can sing your song, I can sing my part, and we're each playing a different part, but we're in harmony together.
Right. So you could have like C, E, G, and then you could throw in a couple more, and those we know that those sound good together. Whereas you could throw an F sharp and just different things, and it's like, ooh, yeah, that doesn't work. Well, that's a little bit what attunement is, and attunement is when somebody is just like, hey, I don't need advice right now. I just need to be able to say this. I need to be able to verbalize, okay, I was working on this project and I had so many pages in this doc and it just freaked out and I lost it all. I didn't save it and I've completely lost it all. And it's just really bad.
Yeah.
I'm going to start back at the drawing board, and it's just allowing, and if you let me go through and just kind of talk about it, and then without you saying, okay, I can fix this, I can continue talking. I lost all this information in this doc, but I've got these other notes that I had started out in another doc, and I've got this, and I've got this, and I think I can piece it together. And you know what? Some of those other things weren't as good anyways, and all of a sudden I feel hope. I had lost all of this work, but it's okay. It's not going to break me. And that's really what attunement is you letting someone else just kind of sit in it, but being there for it and just being in harmony and it's saying, you're not alone in this, and I've got you.
Well, and I think it says something really powerful. You said it gives people hope. And I think that's the key, right? Is when you feel like there is no hope, right? Motivation is lost. You just want to give up. And really, we want to be the support for people because we all go through tough times. And if we can learn to really kind of get in people's well, Brene Brown has a great analogy about getting into people's well. You can stand on top and just give advice and tell people how to get out of the well, or you can just get in the well a little bit. And so that's really what some of these competencies are all about. So, attunement, comfort, right? Another one is identification. And that really is sharing a similar story or background, right? Because the one thing that people, I think, want a lot of times is they want to feel like, hey, you get me. What's even interesting, Lisa, when you think about when you walk into a room and it's a room full of people, the first thing your brain kind of wonders is there anybody here like me? Right? If you're in the military, you look around, who's in here in the military, right?
Who can I connect with?
Who can I connect
with? Who is there that's just
right? Who can I identify with? They know my story, right? If I'm in the military, we all kind of have similar stories going through boot camp, right? Or if you're a mom of young kids, right? Oh, right. Oh, we both have preschoolers. Hey, is there another mom or is there another businessman here? Is there another husband here? And it's this whole idea of like identification because people want to feel like, hey, I get you. And that's really about being relatable. Right? Because people connect with people that have similar experiences. So sometimes you want to think, okay, how can I identify with this person? And it really is about the stories, not the words, right? Sharing similar stories. Because when you share a story, you're not just communicating information. It's like you're communicating a narrative or you're sharing a meaning, right? Because it's not just words, but it's like, oh, hey, for example, Lisa, I was talking to a gentleman this morning who his wife had died just recently, and I had called him. He's doing some project work for us, and I've never experienced that, but I simply shared the story about my dad passing, and I said, hey, listen, I don't have the same story, but the one thing that I learned from this experience is just let the emotions go through you. When you feel like you have to cry, just let it go through you. And he says, man, I really appreciate that. He says, because, I've been, dealing with that, and right, and it was not the same story. But I did everything I could to identify and just connect with them because stories create emotions. And, Lisa, people think in stories. We don't think in words, right? We think in pictures, not in words. And so these stories create emotions, and that emotion is the basis for connection. And so that's where this is what's really powerful is just how do you step in? Because if we can identify, because think about this, we identify, we connect, we're more collaborative.
Absolutely. And with that, it's very fascinating because we talked about at the beginning of the podcast that you can have situations where you're talking to someone and then all of a sudden your basketball goes flat and you cannot figure out what happened in that conversation. You were connecting and all of a sudden you went down the wrong path and the basketball went flat and the conversation went dead and you're kind of left there thinking, gosh, what happened? What did I do? Well, I had a situation like that.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine and she had a situation going on and she was telling me about a circumstance that was going on in her family. And it was really hard. It was super, super difficult for her to deal with this. And she was kind of broken and trying to figure out how she was even going to process through this because it also tied back to some things that had happened, a couple decades ago in her past. And now she was having to kind of figure out, okay, what's the perspective? What's the path that I'm going to take on this? And so I went into identification because I have kind of a similar story of something. And I just went lightly into that of I do actually I've got this experience and it's kind of tough for me. And the basketball went flat.
I remember this. Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh, what just happened here? Well, that was a really good example of I was thinking that if I kind of identified with her, that she would know that would comfort her, that would bring her something. But it was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And I didn't even go into hours and hours of my identification story. I was just like, I totally get it. That happened to me too. And the basketball went so flat. And so then I went, and I should have backed up and just gone into the next one, which is just validation.
Validation, right? If we just go identification, if your basketball does go flat, you can move into validation. So explain what this means, because this is super helpful.
So validation, it's super just very easy. It's something that helps us pay attention to our circumstances. It's just this, your experience is significant. And it's not to be minimized.
And I think that's the key. Sometimes when we over-identify, right?
Or identify at all.
People feel minimized.
They feel like their experience is minimized. Like you can't truly know what I'm experiencing. But validation is just like, yeah, your experience is valid and what you're going through is real and that's okay. But what happens when we validate others is we just kind of allow them to pay attention to their experiences. We allow them to just kind of make sense of what's going on, and then they can make their own good decisions. And a kind of a good example of this would be an idea exchange that we have when we're in a team.
Yeah.
So you've got your team meeting, you're together, and you're like, okay, let's sit down and let's strategize on how we can serve our clients better in 2024. Let's have everybody, we've got our whiteboard, we're going to throw these ideas up on the page, and we're just going to, and at that point in idea exchange, there's no ideas that are bad. All ideas in an idea exchange are valid, and we have to validate each other, because when, like in this situation with this friend of mine, she did not feel validated. She felt minimized, and then she shut down, and her basketball went flat. But in an idea exchange on how can we make our clients just feel really valued, we're going to throw up a lot of ideas, and a lot of ideas are going to be not great. They're not going to be applicable, but those ideas can spawn the creativity for the next idea, which can help kind of get that snowball rolling. And then we can come up with, oh, wow, we have just some really great paths to follow that we can communicate how important our clients are to us and how we truly value them. And that's just that's something that your team can do in validation, is not minimizing or not making someone feel stupid or ineffectual or incompetent, but just thinking, okay, you do have something to offer.
Well, and I think leaders have to be very careful, because sometimes they think, oh, my way is the only way, or my way is the right way, or I know the answer. Yeah. And there are a lot of things that we don't know. We think we know, but if we don't get these other viewpoints in mind, I mean, Lisa, this just happened this morning in a team meeting, and I really had to step back and validate some of the ideas that people were throwing, because I sort of have an idea of what I think we should do. But I knew if I would have just said, this is it right here, and we're just going to stop right now, people would have felt invalidated.
Well, and it would have shut down the creativity of taking what you probably have is a really good idea and making it great. And we could not have gone from good to great without validation and keeping the door of collaborative creativity open. Yeah,
so validation is super important. And Lisa, let's cover this last one, and then in the next podcast we'll go through some other competencies of connection. But the last one I kind of want to cover today is containment. Now, here's what this means: is that sometimes people just need to vent, right? Just get it out of my head, out of my heart, get it out there so that I can look at it clearly, right? Because sometimes when it just sits in your head, it's like a muddled mess, and you don't think clearly, and so you just need to get it out, and people really need that safe place to express emotions, where they don't feel judged, where they feel validated. So, and it's this idea for somebody to come in and share really strong emotions, and you just keep your peace. Right? You just keep your peace, you keep your joy, you keep your sense of stability and security. You don't take things personal, and you just allow them to kind of just vent without you reacting.
Okay, and so when we say sharing really strong emotions, that doesn't mean acting out of those strong emotions. That doesn't mean yelling and screaming and throwing things or kicking the dog or whatever. You can have really strong emotions and not physically act out of them. You could be very angry and your hands could shake, but you're not hurting anything or anyone in the process.
Right, because it's almost like, Lisa, I'm okay with any emotion that you feel, but what I'm not okay with are some of the expressions of that, right? Yelling, screaming, sarcasm, right? Whining, complaining, but I'm okay with them irritated, annoyed, bothered, frustrated, angry, upset. Totally okay with that. Right? I can't change that, but how we express it sometimes, right? There has to be standards of behaviors. That's really what we're talking about, is allowing the safe place for people to get these out of their head. Because what happens is that if you don't, it's going to bottle up. And here's the thing about emotions: they are energy.
They are absolutely energy.
And that energy
good emotions and bad emotions
has to go somewhere.
Full of energy.
Right? That emotion has to go somewhere. And if you don't get it out, because you always want to say your emotions so you don't display your emotions. And I think that's the key. A lot of people display their emotions because they don't know how to say them. They don't know how to communicate it, so it comes out in angry eyes. Right? I mean, that's how it comes out for me. I remember our daughter Melissa coming in. She was younger at the time, and she said, "Well, Dad, why are you so angry?" And I was like, "I'm not angry." And she goes, "Well, you have angry eyes." And I really was angry, right? But I just was not aware. but just the opportunity to talk about it. So I think what happens a lot of times is people bottle these things up, and you just got to have this opportunity to let it flow through you. And it really, think about this, it really creates a safe place for brainstorming and problem solving.
Absolutely. And it was fascinating. I was just listening to a podcast by Caroline Leaf, and she was talking about the value of your emotions and how a lot of times it's been not considered appropriate to have emotions, or it's been not considered appropriate to have what we would call negative emotions. So the sad, mad, frustrated, those are considered negative emotions. And she's trying to re-educate people. And these emotions are not negative and positive. They're neutral. And it's what you do with them that cause them to be negative and positive. And so when we are venting we are allowing people to vent without reacting, or we're venting and need someone to not react, it's knowing that these emotions they're just neutral, and being able to communicate them and express them in a way that is helpful, positive, and beneficial to create a good result is just super vital. Yeah. But when we come at it thinking, okay, this is negative, then we're coming at it from a deficit. And that deficit causes us sometimes to react in a negative way.
Well, we kind of come at a place of judgment, not a place of acceptance, right? And then we're already behind the 8 ball a little bit. So, Lisa, as we're kind of talking about this today, I think my big takeaway, and the thing that I'm working on personally, is containment. Is this competency of, I'm going to be this place where I can allow people to vent and not react out of it. I allow them to share strong emotion and not feel like I have to solve it. Not feel like I have to step in with a solution, and allow them that place to vent. And I think everything here, what we're talking about today, is how do we deepen connection so that we're more collaborative and more creative?
Absolutely. We are really talking about this aspect of communication is syncing and alignment. And it's how to be in sync with others. So when we do an idea exchange, or when someone's just having a tough day, that we can still stay in sync, and we can still be incredibly collaborative. Yeah. And if you want communication competencies and that checklist and these 25 skills to kind of help increase your communication, let us know. We've got it in the notes, and you can download it. It's totally free, and it'll just try to help you be a little bit more in sync with others and in alignment with others.
Yeah, and we just want to encourage you, go pick up the book
People Fuel
by John Townsend, because some of these ideas we got from him, so we just want to give credit where credit is due.
Most of these ideas, the concepts of all of these, and it was so fascinating. We
want to share it with you.
We did a deeper dive personally into them and realized we have a lot to learn in these.
We do. We do. So we're going to keep on for the next couple podcasts talking about these different communication competencies, and we'll go from there. So we'll see you next time on the Drama Free Living Podcast.